Dear friends in South Korea, I extend my warm greetings from Germany, southern Germany in Bavaria, to all the participants of this conference, be it in person or online. I'm very honored to be invited to speak to you and thank the Healthy Family Global Coalition for the invitation. 3 years ago, I had the chance to visit your beautiful country in person. Now times have radically changed. We don't have to leave our homes to exchange our ideas. My talk has 3 parts: the global revolution, the global sexual revolution, destruction of freedom in the name of freedom. 2, the ideological background behind the global revolution. And the 3rd part, the situation in Germany and Europe. So we come to the first topic, the global sexual revolution, destruction of freedom in the name of freedom. The battle for the family is the most important battle of our time. The family is under attack as never before, on all levels, ideologically, politically, socially, and economically. Millions of people around the world understand the importance of the battle. They understand that the family is the cornerstone in the order of creation. It is the foundation of society. The family exists before the state. The state is dependent on the family, not the other way around. Therefore, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 states, quote, "The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state." The sexual revolution is the prime factor for the destruction of the family. My eyes were opened at the beginning of this millennium by a 600-page study of the anthropologist J.D. Unwin with the title Sex and Culture, published by Oxford University Press in 1934. In the early 1930s, Unwin wanted to test the thesis of the famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who said that culture is based on the sublimation of the sexual drive. And this result, in a nutshell, high culture can only exist with strict sexual norms, namely monogamy and virginity before marriage. If a culture gives up these limitations, it steps down from the stage of history within 3 generations. This is what Unwin discovered. I was thrilled by that study and looked around and said, oh, there's truth to it. We have a dissolution of sexual limitations and we witness the disintegration of the family, the disintegration of society and the demographic decline. What makes up a family? Since time immemorial, it is the union between a man and a woman who bring up children. Of course, there have always been different social structures of family and different times of history and different cultural settings. I am a sociologist by training. Sociology has always studied the different structures and norms of family in different societies and historical epochs. The magnificent Western culture built on the Christian concept of children is built on the Christian concept of family, man and woman united for life and marriage, devoted to bring up children. These structures and norms have been radically changed by political strategy in the last half century, and they are still being changed with accelerated speed and political force. We are in the midst of a top top-down revolution. It is a war between the culture of life and the culture of death. It is a war between Marxist atheists who want to establish equality and of believers of God who want to establish justice. It is a war between those who want to establish a totalitarian dictatorship by manipulating of mass consciousness, the distortion of law, and the use of political power without reference to the common good. And those who are fighting for the family of husband, wife, and children, for the freedom of the religion, for the freedom of speech, and the right of life from conception to natural death. Revolutions usually are an answer to the demands of suppressed and suffering people. But where are the masses who demand same-sex marriage or the so-called freedom to change your gender at will, or the sexual indoctrination of children beginning in kindergarten? They do not exist. The sexual revolution is a top-down revolution brought about by the elites of power and money. The United Nations, the European Union, and other supernatural organizations, private, immensely rich foundations like Rockefeller, Bill and Melinda Gates, George Soros, big tech, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and NGOs like International Planned Parenthood Federation and, of course, the LGBT organizations. Probably you all know L stands for lesbian, G for gay, B for bisexual, T for transgender, I for transgender, I for intersexuality, and Q for anything else for the word queer. These NGOs use small and smallest sexual minorities to wage war on the traditions that once supported the family of father, mother, and children. One by one, every nation is under relentless attack. Now South Korea is the target of the global activists of the sexual revolution. The intellectual framework for this revolution is gender ideology. In 2006, 15 years ago, I wrote my first book against gender ideology with the title, The Gender Revolution, Relativism in Action. Christians thought I was exaggerating. The sexual activists tried to silence me during all this time unsuccessfully. The false claims of gender theory are: 1, biological gender as either man or woman is irrelevant for human identity. 2, the human being can choose his or her gender identity on an infinite continuum between male and female. 3, sexual activity must be freed from all moral restrictions. The only limitation is the consensus principle. Everything is allowed as long as the partners seem to agree. We see gender ideology intends to destroy the basic fabric of human existence. The pressure of the sexual revolution is immense. It is so strong that we can see a loss of common sense in people, a reluctance to hold on to what we see in the mirror when we look at our bodies, to hold on to what we know as truth in our hearts, to hold on to what our conscience tells us about fidelity and adultery and pornography. Masses of educated people surrender to the ferocious power of the mainstream. To hold on to common sense and our conscience in our time might mean that you stand alone in the environment of your work, your friends, even your family. It will mean that you have to make sacrifices for the truth. The sexual revolution driven forward by gender ideology sails under false flags. These are freedom, tolerance, non-discrimination, human rights, equality. Freedom. As human beings, we do not have unlimited freedom. We are born into a world which we have not made and a family that we have not chosen. We must be good stewards of this world and not exploiters. In order to live in peace with our fellow human beings and our own heart, we must overcome our egotism and learn to love. The destruction of moral limitations of sexual activity will not make us free, but on the contrary, it will make us a slave of the sexual drive and unable to build a family on faithful marriage. We want freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of educating our children according to our own values. But all these freedoms are more and more undermined by the state. There is an international organization of lawyers who fights for these freedoms on the highest level of the judiciary. They are called Alliance Defending Freedom International. Go to their website and read the cases for which they fight. You will not believe how deeply we have already moved into a new kind of totalitarianism. This is now at stake for South Korea too. We are fighting a very important battle. What about tolerance? Of course, we stand for a tolerant society. We respect the dignity of each person independent of their sexual orientation. But the concept of tolerance seems to work only in one direction. Tolerance for any sexual activity in the abyss of exploiting another person as a sexual object. But there is no tolerance for people who hold on to the notion that sexuality belongs into the marriage of a man and a woman who want to give life to children. In Europe, proud of its democracy, we now have outrageous legal persecution of people who dare to stand up for their Christian values. Just an example, the former Finnish interior minister and now member of parliament, Paavirainen, is threatened with imprisonment because of a tweet in 2004 saying that sex belongs into marriage. Discrimination. We do not want anybody to be discriminated because of his sexual orientation. But who is discriminated in our societies? LGBT people or Christians? LGBT people can hold highest offices in the state. They can organize marches through the capitals of our nations and bluntly show their sexual preferences. Their so-called values have become the values of the United Nations and the European Union. Severely discriminated are now people who all hold on to the fact that there are only two genders, man and woman, and that this cannot be changed. Even world-famous author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling, has to suffer discrimination from her publisher and the actors of the Potter films because she said that the biological gender of a person is relevant. And so on, and so on, and so on, all over the world. We have to face the fact to break the breakdown of the family is the strategic global agenda of the powerful of this world, a global network of the big players in politics, finance, and media. What is the intention behind it? There is no reason to assume that intelligent individuals like the Rockefellers, Gates, Soros, Zuckerbergs, Jeff Bezos, Klaus Schwab, and the heavyweights behind them bring about social change that is not in line with their intentions. We can assume that what is happening is just what they want to happen. And what do we see happening? The sexual revolution brings forth family breakdown. Identity dissolution through gender policy produces uprooted individuals who can be manipulated and forced to fit into the agenda, unable to organize resistance. Family breakdown creates a neglected and sick young generation. My latest book deals with that. It has the title, The Abandoned Generation. In German-speaking countries, about 30% of the young generation are diagnosed as ill physically and mentally. It leads into the demographic winter and achieves the proclaimed aim of a reduction of the world population. The pursuing social chaos is the pretext for a new totalitarianism using the technical means for almost limitless possibilities of control and surveillance. Thank you for listening to the first part of my presentation.